Chronicles of Narnia, The Silver Chair by C.S. Lewis. Chapter 16, The Healing of the Harms. When Jill woke the next morning, she found herself in a cave. She thought for one horrid moment that she was back in the underworld, but when she noticed she was lying on a bed of heather with a furry mantle over her and saw a cheery fire crackling as if newly lit on a stone hearth, and farther off morning sunlight coming in through the cave's mouth, she remembered all the happy truth. They had had a delightful supper, all crowded into that cave, in spite of being so sleepy before it was properly over. She had a vague impression of dwarfs crowding around the fire with frying pans rather bigger than themselves, and the hissing and delicious smell of sausages and more sausages. And not French sausages, half full of bread and soya bean either, but real meaty spicy ones, fat and piping hot, and burst just the tiniest bit burnt. And meat mugs and frothy chocolate, and roast potatoes and roast chestnuts and baked apples with raisins stuck where the cores had been, and then ices just to refreshen you up after all the hot things. Joel sat up and looked around. Puddlegum and Eustace were lying far away, both fast asleep. "Hi, you two!" shouted Joel in a loud voice. "Aren't you ever going to get up?" "Sure, sure," a sleepy voice said somewhere above her. "Time to be settling down. Have a good snooze. Do. Don't take a to-do. To-do." "Why, I do believe," said Joel, glancing up at a white bundle of fluffy feathers which was pierced on the top of a grandfather clock in one of the corner of the cave. "I do believe it's Gilmfeather." "True," read the owl, lifting its head out from under its wing and opening one eye. "I came up with a message for the prince at about 2. Squirrels brought up us the good news. Message for the prince. He's gone. You two fellow too. Good day." And the head disappeared again. As there seemed no further hope of getting information from the owl, Jill got up and began looking around for any chance of a wash and some breakfast. But almost at once a little fawn came trotting into the cave with a sharp click-clack of its goatee hoofs on the same floor. "Ah, you've woken up at last, daughter of Eve," he said. "Perhaps you'd better take the son of Adam. You've got to be off in a few minutes, and 2 senators have very kindly offered to let you ride on their backs down to Chair Paravel." He added in a lower voice, "Of course, you realize it's a most special, unheard of honor to be allowed to ride a senator. I don't know if I've ever heard of anyone doing it before. It wouldn't do to keep them waiting." "Where's the prince?" was the first question of Eustace and Puddlegum as soon as they had been waked. "He's gone down to meet the king, his father, at Chair Paravel," answered the fawn, whose name was Orange. "His Majesty's ship is expected to harbour at any moment. It seems that he met King Aslan. I don't know whether it was a vision or face-to-face, before he had sailed far, and Aslan turned him back and told him he would find his long-lost son awaiting him when he reached Narnia." Eustace was now up, and he had Jill set about helping Organs to get the breakfast. Puddlegum was told to stay in bed. A senator called Cloudbirth, a famous healer, or as Orange called it, a leech, was coming to his burnt foot. "Ah," said Puddlegum, almost in a tone of contentment. "He'll want to have the leg of at the knee, I shouldn't wonder. See if he doesn't." But he was quite glad to stay in bed. Breakfast was scrambled eggs and toast, and Eustace tackled it just as if he had not had a very large supper in the middle of the night. "I say, son of Adam," said the fawn, looking certain awe at Eustace's mouthfuls. "There's no need to hurry quite so dreadfully as that. I don't think the senators have finished their breakfasts yet." "But they must have got up very late," said Eustace. "I bet it's after 10 o'clock." "Oh, no," said Orange. "They got up before it was light." "Then they must have waited the dickens of a time for breakfast," said Eustace. "No, they didn't," said Orange. "They began eating the minute they awoke." "Golly," said Eustace. "Do they eat a very big breakfast?" "Why, son of Adam, don't you understand? A senator has a man's stomach and a horse's stomach, and of course both want breakfast, so first he has to have porridge and pavaders and kidneys and bacon and omelette and cold ham and toast and marmalade and coffee and beer. And after that he attends to the horse part of himself by grazing for an hour or so and finishing up with a hot mash, some oats and a bag of sugar. That's why it's such a serious thing to ask a senator to stay for the weekend. A very serious thing indeed." At that moment there was the sound of horse hoofs tapping on the rock from the mouth of the cave, and the children looked up. The 2 senators, one with a black and one with a golden beard, flowing over their magnificent bare chest, stood waiting for them, bending their heads a little as to look into the cave. Then the children became very polite and finished their breakfast very quickly. No one thinks a senator funny when he sees it. They are solemn, majestic people, full of ancient wisdom which they learn from the stars, not easily made merry or angry, but their anger is terrible as a tidal wave when it comes. "Goodbye, dear Puddlegum," said Joel, going over to the Marshwiggles' bed. "I'm sorry we called you a wet blanket." So am I, said Eustace. You've been the best friend in the world. And I do hope we'll meet again, added Joel. Not much chance of that, I would say, replied Puddlegum. I don't reckon I'm very likely to see my old wigwam again either. And that prince, he's a nice chap, but do you think he's very strong? Constitution ruined with living underground, I shouldn't wonder. Looks the sort that might go off any day. Puddlegum, said Joel. You're a very old humbug. You sound as doleful as a funeral, and I believe you're perfectly happy. And you talk as if you're afraid of everything, and when you're really brave as a lion. Now, speaking of funerals, said Puddlegum, but Joel, who had the centaurs tapping with their hoofs behind her, surprised him very much by flinging her arms around his thin neck and kissing his muddy-looking face while Eustace wrung his hand. Then they both flushed away to the centaurs, and the marsh wiggle, sinking back on his bed, remarked to himself, Well, I wouldn't have dreamt of her doing that, even though I am a good-looking chap. To ride on a centaur is no doubt a great honour, and except Joel and Eustace there is probably no one alive in the world today who has had it, but it is very uncomfortable, for no one who ever valued his life would suggest putting a saddle on a centaur, and riding bareback is no fun, especially if, like Eustace, you have never learned to ride at all. The centaurs were very polite in a grave, gracious, grown-up kind of way, and as they chatted through the Narnian woods they spoke, without turning their heads, telling the children about the properties of herbs and roots, the influences in the planets, the 9 names of Aslan with their meanings, and the things of that sort. But however sore the jolted 2 humans were, they would now give anything to have that journey over again, to see those glades in the slopes sparkling with the night snow, to be read by rabbits and squirrels and birds that wished you good morning, to breathe again the air of Narnia and hear the voices of the Narnian trees. They came down to the river, flying bright and blue in the winter sunshine, far below the last bridge which is at last the snug, red-hoofed little town of Baruna, and were ferried across in a flat barge by the ferryman, or rather a ferry wiggle, for it is marsh wiggles who do most of the water and fishy kinds of work in Narnia. And when they had crossed, they rode along the south bank, and the river presently came to Chair Paravel itself, and at the very moment of their arrival they saw that some bright ship which they had seen when they first set foot in Narnia, gliding up the river like a huge bird. All the court were once more assembled on the green between the castle and quay to welcome King Caspian home again. Rilian, who had changed his black clothes and was now dressed in a scarlet cloak over silver mail, stood close to the water's edge, bareheaded, to receive his father, and the dwarf Trumpkin sat beside him on his little donkey chair. The children saw there would be no chance of reaching this prince through all that crowd, and, anyway, they now felt rather shy, so they asked the senators if they might go on sitting their backs a little longer, and thus see everything over the heads of the courtiers, and the senators said they might. A flush of silver trumpets came over the water from the ship's deck, and the sailors threw a rope. Rats, talking rats of course, and marsh wiggles made it fast ashore, and the ship was warped in. Musicians, hidden somewhere in the crowd, began to play solemn trumpet music, and soon the king's galleon was alongside the rats and ran the gangway on board her. Joel expected to see the old king came down it, but there appeared to be some hitch. A lord with a pale face came ashore and knelt to the prince and Trumpkin. 3 were talking with their heads close together for a few minutes, and no one could hear what they said. The music played on, but you could feel everyone was becoming uneasy. Then 4 knights carrying something and going very slowly appeared on deck. Then they started to come down the gangway, and you could see what they were carrying. It was the old king on a bed, very pale and still. They set him down. The prince knelt beside him and embraced him. They could see King Caspian raising his hand to bless his son, and everyone cheered, but it was a half-hearted cheer, for they all felt something was going wrong. Then suddenly the king's head fell back upon his pillows, and the musicians stopped, and there was dead silence. The prince, kneeling by the king's bed, laid down his head upon it and wept. There were whisperings and goings to and fro. Then Joel noticed that all who wore hats, bonnets, helmets, or hoods were taking them off, Eustace included. And then she heard a rustling and flapping noise above the castle. And then she looked and saw that the great banner with the golden lion on it was being brought down half-mast. And slowly, mercilessly, with wailing strings and sonnet blowing of horns, the music began again, this time a tune to break your heart. They both slipped off their senators, who took no notice of them. I wish I was home, said Joel. Eustace nodded, saying nothing, and bit his lip. I have come, said a deep voice behind them. They turned and saw the lion himself, so bright and real and strong that everyone else began at once to look pale and shadowy compared with him. In the less time it takes to breathe, Joel forgot about the dead king of Narnia and remembered only how she had Eustace fall over the cliff. Now she had helped him have nearly all the signs and all the snapping quarrellings, and wanted to say I'm sorry, but she could not speak. Then the lion drew them towards him with his eyes, and bent down and touched their pale faces with his tongue, and said, Think of that no more. I will more. I will not always be scolding. You have done the work for which I sent you into Narnia. Please, Aslan, said Joel, may we go home now? Yes, I have come to bring you home, said Aslan. Then he opened his mouth wide and blew. But then this time they had no sense of flying through the air. Instead, it seemed that they remained still, and the wild breath of Aslan blew away the ship and the dead king and the castle and the snow of the winter sky. For all these things floated off into the air like wreaths of smoke, and suddenly they were standing on the great brightness of midsummer sunshine, on smooth turf among mighty trees, and beside a fair, fresh stream. Then they saw that they were once more on the mountain of Aslan, high above and beyond the end of in which Narnia lies. But the strange thing was that the funeral music for the King Caspian still went on, though no one could tell where it came from. They were walking beside the stream, and the lion went before them, and it became so beautiful, the music so despairing, that Jill did not know which of them was that filled her eyes with tears. Then Aslan stopped, and the children looked at the stream, and there on the golden gravel of the bed stream lay King Caspian, dead, with the water flowing over him like liquid glass. His long white beard swayed in it at water speed. All three stood and wept. Then the lion wept, great lion tears, each tear more precious than the earth could be if it was a single solid diamond, and Joel noticed that Eustace looked rather like a child crying, nor like a boy crying and wanting to hide it, but like a grown-up crying. At least, that was the nearest she could get to it. But really, as she said, people don't seem to have any particular ages on that mountain. Son of Adam, said Aslan, go into that thicket and pluck the thorn that you will find there, and bring it to me. Eustace obeyed. The thorn was a foot long and sharp as a rapier. Dive it into my paw, son of Adam, said Aslan, holding up his rightful paw and spreading out the great pads towards Eustace. It was I, said Eustace. Yes, said Aslan. Then Eustace set his teeth and drove the thorn into the lion's pad, and there came out a great drop of blood, redder than all the redness that you could have ever seen or imagined. And it splashed into the stream over the dead body of the king, and at the same moment the doleful music stopped, and the dead king began to be changed. His white beard turned into grey, and from grey to yellow, and got shorter and vanished altogether, and his sunken cheeks grew round the fresh, and the wrinkles were smoothened, and his eyes opened, and his eyes and lips both laughed, and suddenly he leaped up and stood before them, a very young man, or a boy. But Joel couldn't say which, because some people having no particular ages in Aslan's country. Even in this world, of course, it is the stupidest children who are most childish, and the stupidest grown-ups who are most grown up. And he rushed to Aslan and flung his arms as far as they would go around the huge neck, and he gave Aslan the strong kisses of a king, and Aslan gave him the wild kisses of a lion. Terribly sorry about that. At last Caspian turned to the others. He gave a great laugh of astonished joy. Why, Eustace, he said. Eustace, so you did reach the end of the world after all. What about my second best sword that you broke on the sea serpent? Eustace made a step towards him with both hands held out, and then drew back with a somewhat startled expression. Look here, I say, he stammered. It's all very well, but didn't you? Oh, don't be such an ass, said Caspian. But, said Eustace, looking at Aslan, isn't he, died? Yes, said the lion in a very quiet voice. Almost, Jill thought, as if he were laughing. He has died. Most people have, you know. Even I have. There are few who haven't. Oh, said Caspian. I see what's bothering you. You think I'm a ghost or some nonsense. Don't you see? I would be if that happened if that appeared in Narnia now, because I don't belong there anymore. But one can't be a ghost in one's own country. I might be a ghost if I got into your world. I don't know. But I suppose it isn't yours either, now you're here. A great hope rose in the children's hearts, but Aslan shook his shaggy head. No, my dears, he said. When you meet me here again you will have come to stay, but not now. You must go back to your own world for a while. Sir, said Caspian, I've always wanted to have just one glimpse of their world. Is that wrong? You cannot want wrong things any more now that you have died, my son, said Aslan, and you will see their world for 5 minutes of their time. It will take no longer for you to set things right here. Then Aslan explained to Caspian what Joel and Eustace were going back to and all about the experiment house, and he seemed to notice quite as well as they did. Daughter, said Aslan to Jill, a pluck of switch of that bush. She did, and as soon as it was in her hand it turned to a fine new riding crop. Now, sons of Adam, draw your swords, said Aslan, but use only the flat, for it cowards the children, not warriors against whom I send you. Are you coming with us, Aslan? Said Jill. They shall only see my back, said Aslan. He led them rapidly through the wood before they had gone many paces, and the wall of Experiment House appeared before them. Then Aslan roared so that the sun shook in the sky, and 30 feet of the wall fell down before them. They looked through the gap down into the school shrubbery and onto the roof of the gym, all under the same dull autumn sky which they had seen before their adventures began.